quiz 2 and quiz 3. Okay? So, bali, ika-cancel natin completely yung quiz 3. Okay? We will cancel your quiz 3 completely. Although, hindi siya ika-cancel. Papalitan ko siya actually ng iba. Okay? But, ganito muna. Yung schedule ng quiz ninyo would be, your quiz 2 would be conducted on the day or on the date that is supposed that we are to conduct your quiz number 3. Okay? So, dun sa class calendar natin, yung schedule ng quiz 3 doon sa class calendar natin, yun na yung magiging schedule ng quiz number 2 natin. Okay. Now, nag-isip ako ng kung ano yung ipapalit ko sa quiz number 3. Okay. But one thing that I would be replacing it with is to require you to attend a webinar which the College of Engineering would conduct. Okay. The College of Engineering would conduct. Actually, hindi pa masyadong final eh. Okay. Yung webinar hindi pa masyadong final. Okay. In terms of schedule. Pero yung i-discuss number one, ang magdi-discuss is yung kalahati ako yung magdi-discuss. Okay? So the other half would be another faculty. Okay? But the discussion would center around actually data analysis. Okay? So medyo tatalunin natin ng konti yung mga lessons nyo, and we'll go straight to we will go straight to the data analysis part. Okay? So dun sa webinar that will be conducted with the webinar that we will be conducted, isa sa pag-uusapan doon are the tools. Okay, una actually is the process of yung tamang proseso ng data analysis. Okay, saan kayo magsisimula at paano kayo dapat matapos, okay, sa isang data analysis problem. Okay, and most importantly, i-discuss natin yung mga yung tools. Okay, yung the tools that are needed, okay, in conducting or in making data analysis. Most especially, ako ang i-discuss ko most especially is yung Excel. Okay, so dun sa webinar na yon, I'll talk about how Excel is used, okay, is to be used, okay, sa process of data analysis. Okay, so from starting from your raw data set, okay, galing sa raw data set nyo papunta sa mga statements, okay, statements that you can make out of your data set, papunta sa summary of your data set, including yung mga visualization, okay, which tell the story of your data set. Okay, so hindi pa masyadong final yung schedule, okay, at saka yung mga i-discuss, okay. But ang alam ko, sigurado to na that webinar would be on June 9, okay. So next week, Wednesday siya. And June 9, Wednesday, and magsisimula siya ng morning. Baka magsimula kami ng morning. Kasi if we are to if we are to start it if we are to conduct it on June 9, kailangan kasi bago mag June 16 tapos na namin yung yung series of webinars na yun eh. So it's likely that we will consume we will use the entire June 9 day para doon sa sa webinar na yun. So a part of your quiz 3, okay, a part of your quiz 3 is to actually attend that that webinar. Okay? So you makakakuha kayo ng score sa quiz 3, okay? Makakakuha kayo ng partial score sa quiz 3. Okay? Kapag I was able to see that you have attended that seminar. Okay? Now, partial score, ibig sabihin, kahit mag-attend kayo, that does not constitute the entire quiz 3. So may another pa yon, may another part pa yung quiz 3 natin. Okay? So which is it's likely na baka tungkol dun sa webinar na i-conduct natin. Okay? So ganun yung mangyayari sa quiz 2 and quiz 3 natin. Okay? So I see kasi that at this point I'd be able to to finish up yung pag-discuss siguro ng mga next mga mga 1 to 2 topics pa ang madi-discuss ko. So topics 4 and 5. Okay. Possibly, okay. Kapag hinati ko pa yung topics 3 and then topic 4 and then topic 5 sa quiz 2 at saka quiz 3, parang hindi na siya masyadong practical. Okay, so that is why I decided na i-compress ko na lang yung topics na yon, topics 3, 4 and 5 sa isang quiz. Okay, and then pag-isipan ko na lang kung paano ko or kung paano natin aanuhan or lalagyan ng score yung quiz number 3 niyo. So again, yung partial score niyo sa quiz 3 would depend on your attendance on the webinar. Okay, that will be conducted next week. So hintayin niyo yung hintayin niyo yung announcement ng college regarding doon. Okay? So again, for you, you are to attend that webinar. Okay? So otherwise, wala kayong makukuha score sa quiz number 3. Ganun yung mangyayari. Okay? So I hope everyone understands that that scenario. Okay? So ayun na nga, we will move your quiz number 2, okay, which will cover yung mga last topics that we will discuss. Okay? 2 basta yung schedule ng quiz number 3 dapat. Okay? Now, supposedly, ang schedule nyo kasi is ganito. Magko-quiz number 3 kayo, tapos kinabukasan, magsisimula na yung final exams nyo. Okay? So, ang final exams nyo kasi is ibibigay ng 3 days. So which means 3 days yung open. So at the 3rd day, kailangan yung ipasa yung yung report niyo. Okay, so that's your final exam. Kaya lang I was thinking that to move your the schedule of your final exam on another schedule. Ito siya. Wait lang . Ayaw na lumabas nung anyway, ito nga lang. Okay. So nag-display ako ng calendar natin. Okay? So currently nasa week 9 tayo. Okay? So currently we are on week 9. So week 10, 11, tapos yung week 12 kasi natin 3 days lang. Ito yung quiz number 2 ninyo, yung schedule ng quiz number 2 ninyo. Okay. Now, supposedly, ang schedule sa class calendar niyo, if you are to check, ito yung schedule ng final exams nyo. Bali 24, 25, and 26. So I'm planning to move that to instead of having your final exams from 24, 25, and 26, okay? So ibibigay natin ng 24, isasubmit nyo yung reports nyo by on or before the 26th, okay? Instead, ibibigay natin yung exam. I'm thinking that I'll be giving the exams, okay? The questions on 28, okay? And then I'll require you to submit them on the 30th. So, pinag-isipan ko yung part na yun. Kasi tawag dito, for, on your case, medyo mababaw lang yung dahilan. Okay. Medyo gusto ko lang kasing i-synchronize yung final exams nung lahat nung lecture classes ko. Okay. So, since I'm thinking of dahil yung sa iba kong klase has laboratory courses or laboratory classes. I was thinking na unahin muna yung laboratory nila. Laboratory skills assessment nila before they take their final exam sa sa lecture class nila. Okay. Then in your case, I was thinking of synchronizing your final exams dun sa kanila. Okay. Pero ano pa lang yan thinking pa lang yan. Okay. So hindi pa yan final. Okay. So as of now, still dahil wala pa naman tayong pina-finalize, still ang final exams nyo would be still given on the 24th of June. Okay, and would be required and you would be required to submit your reports on 26th of June. Okay? So ayun, sa ngayon yun pa lang muna. Okay, pero yun nga, I was thinking of switching yung schedule ng final exams niyo. Okay, pero sigurado na to na ito na yung quiz number 2 ninyo. Okay. It is ayun, sigurado na tayo na yung June 23, Wednesday would be the schedule of your quiz number 2. Okay? So may questions ba?
Wala naman po, sir.
Okay. Also I'll do my best. Okay. I'll do my best to give you the results of your quiz 1 bago tayo mag-quiz 2. Okay? Para malaman niyo rin yung grade nung quiz 1 niyo. Actually, yun din yung dahilan kung bakit gusto kong i-move yung final exams. Kasi gusto ko ring maibigay dahil magkasunod yung quiz 2 niyo at saka yung first day ng final exams niyo. I was thinking of bigyan muna kayo ng ilang araw. Okay, so that maibigay ko muna yung results ng quiz 2 bago ko ibigay yung final exams. Okay. So yun yung isa pang dahilan kung bakit gusto kong i-move yung final exams. Pero for now, pinag-iisipan ko pa nga. Okay. So I will be trying my best, okay, para maibigay sa inyo yung results ng quiz number 1 ninyo bago tayo mag-quiz number 2. Okay. I-announce ko kung paano niyo makukuha yung mga reports nyo that contains my feedback. Okay. Pero essentially gagamit siya ng OneDrive ninyo. Okay. So I hope na marunong kayong gumamit ng OneDrive niyo at alam niyo yung OneDrive account niyo. Okay? So ayun. Anyway, i-announce natin yan kapag magbibigay na tayo ng mga papers. Okay? So, ano ba 'to pinapakita ko? Okay. So, we will now proceed with the itinerary for today. Okay. So, which is yun na nga we will first continue yung discussion on the concept of random variable. Okay? So I think ang natapos na natin last time was that ano ba yung natapos nito? Natapos nito last time. Kalimutan ko bigla. Kanina naalala ko pa. Ayun, nasaan tayo? Na-discuss natin yung example 3.1 at saka example 3.2. Okay. And I think partly na-discuss na natin yung example 3.3. But medyo hindi ko pa yata fully na-discuss yung example 3.3 because dinaanan ko muna yung categorical variable. Okay, yung definition ng categorical variable. So, aside from that, I also have discussed yung the different types of data that a statistical experiment may return. Okay, or may return. So we go along in the presentation of this lesson, okay, mas lalo pa nating mapaparami yung mga types of data na yon. So so far ang nadaanan na natin is yung count data, wherein our random variables or our random variable represent a count of certain occurrence, okay, or a count of certain occurrence of an outcome. Okay, so yun na yung nadaanan natin. Tapos sa 3.3, yun na nga yung pag-uusapan yung pag-create ng dummy variable for random variables that assumes non-numerical values. Okay, so as we go along or as we go deeper in lesson 3.1, bukod sa categorical data or categorical variable and count variables, okay, mas marami pa tayong types of variables that we will be encountering. Specifically, later on, i-classify natin yung variable natin as either discrete variable or continuous variable. Okay? So, ayun. So, let's watch and learn itong lesson 3.1 natin. Continuation to nung last discussion natin.
So, we'll now continue our discussion on the concept of a random variable, in which last time we were talking about assigning a random variable or
may audio naman, di ba?
Meron po, sir. Yes, sir. Meron po.
a variable to the outcome of our statistical experiment. Okay, and then assigning a value, okay, a random value to that variable. Now, since the outcome of our statistical experiment is essentially random, yung value na i-assign nyo dun sa variable na yung value na i-assign natin dun sa outcome ng ating statistical experiment is random, and therefore that variable that makes that variable a random variable also. Okay, so we're now on the concept of what we call a dummy variable. Okay, kasi sa mga previous examples, yung mga ina-assign natin usually the values that or the variables that we assume, okay, for most of our examples or for all of our examples so far are tend to be assigned a numerical value. Okay. Now, we are now on the case where the random variable is categorical. Okay. So, sabi na nga natin na yung variable, yung we have already defined what is a categorical variable. Okay, or essentially a categorical data. Okay, so a categorical data or a categorical variable is a variable that takes on a non-quantitative value. Okay, so let's consider example 3.3, in which we will have the experiment to be the components are arriving from the production line. Okay, from the production line. And they are stipulated to be defective or not defective. Okay. So, in this case, we will not be counting. Okay. Hindi ito katulad ng isang example natin earlier. Wala pa tayong example. This is not really like the example of picking 3 out of many components. Tapos evaluating whether the 3 that you have picked is defective or not. Tapos mag-assign ka ng random variable to pertain to the number of say defectives doon sa nakuha mo. Okay, so hindi ganun yung problem natin dito. This is simply having your components classified as either defective or not defective. Okay? And that status, yung status na yun na defective or not defective. So yung status na defective or not defective, yun yung magiging mismong value nung random variable natin. Okay? But the thing is that since the random variable should take on numerical values. Okay? It should take on numerical values. And the outcomes or the things that you would like to assign to X are not numerical or non-numerical. So, magaan tayo. Magkikreate tayo ng dummy variable. Okay? So, that is, i-assign natin yung defective equal to 1. Okay? Or i-assign natin si X to be 1. Okay? I-assign natin si random variable X to assume a value of 1 if the component is defective. Okay? And 0 siya if not defective. Okay? So, ang idea dito kasi is that there are times that that the values or that the things or the stuff that you would like to assign to your random variable, okay, is non-numerical. Pero kailangan kasi yung random variable niyo must take on numerical values. So yun yung tatandaan natin. Random variables must take on numerical values. Kaya doon sa examples 3.1 tsaka 3.2 earlier, yung random variables natin take on count values. Okay, so, for example sa 3.1, binibilang natin kung ilan yung red balls, so count ng red balls. Ito naman sa 3.2, binibilang natin yung tamang order, the correct order. So the count of correct arrangement. Okay, so count meaning numerical. Okay, ito count of red balls, again count numerical. Okay, in the third example, in example 3.3, okay, your the values that you would like to or the things, the stuff that you would like to assign to your random variable X is not numerical. Okay, but rather categorical. Okay? At kapag categorical siya, again, ang gagawin natin is we assign dummy variables. Okay? So, that dummy variable is given a numerical value for a certain category. So, kung ang category niya ay defective, we will assign a value of 1 for your x. While a value of 0 is assigned to your x for non-defective value. Okay? So, clearly, the assignment of 1 or 0 is arbitrary, though quite convenient. Okay? So, maraming mga experiments, statistical experiments that have this kind of setup. Okay, that is yung variable natin is to be assigned by a value that is non-numerical in nature. Hindi siya numerical in nature. So that is why mag-employ tayo ng dummy variable, and at the same time yung variable natin takes on two. Okay, it takes on two values. Sometimes it's 1 or 0. Sometimes it's actually 1 or 2. Depende sa sa mathematical convenience at saka sa depende sa mathematical convenience and kung gaano ka delikado yung paggamit ng 0 sa mga computations. Okay, kasi we know for a fact that division by 0 causes your division to fail. Okay? So minsan instead of 1 and 0, minsan they use 1 and 2 para maiwasan nila yung so that we will be avoiding the scenario wherein we have to divide something by 0. Okay? So ayun. So that's the thing. Okay? So pagka ganito, ibig sabihin nun, you have a binary variable. Binary means 2. So that means your variable takes on two values. 1 or 0, o kaya 1 or 2. Okay? Depende sa assignment niyo. Okay? So that variable, okay, that binary variable is called a Bernoulli random variable. Okay? So we call a variable or a variable that takes two possible values is what we call a Bernoulli random variable. Okay? So there. Example 4. So statisticians use sampling plans, okay, to either accept or reject batches or lots of material. Okay? Suppose one of these sampling plans involves sampling independently 10 items from a lot of 100 items, in which 12 are defective. Okay? So, for you to determine yung feasibility of a batch. When you are in manufacturing and you are producing your products, okay, in batches, okay, or in lots, okay, as in halimbawa sa mga semiconductor, okay, yung mga quality control persons, mga QC persons, either or perform quality control by inspecting batches. Okay? So halimbawa sa isang batch, merong napoproduce na 100 items. Okay? In one batch, there are 100 items produced. Okay? Now, this is your sampling plan. Okay? Wala pala sa sampling plan. Okay, so in that batch, 100 items are produced. Okay? Now, historically, it is possible na malaman natin historically na sa batch na to, out of 100 items, okay, 12 of those, okay, 12 items are defective. Okay? So sa 100 items sa isang batch, 12 doon ay defective. If it is known historically. Possible naman 'yun kapag ang isang quality control personnel once na magsimula yan ng trabaho, okay, nagki-keep na yan ng records ng mga results ng production. Okay? So it is possible na historically in one batch, okay, in a batch that produces 100 items, 12 of those items are defective. Okay? So now, what you would, your sampling plan now, okay, is to select, or randomly select randomly select 10 items sa isang batch. Okay? That is your sampling plan. Okay? So, if you now let X to be the variable that represents the number of defectives, okay, obtained during sampling. Okay, kung ito yung, if your X, okay, or if you let X to be the number of defectives obtained during sampling, then your X can take on values from 0. Ibig sabihin, sa 10 pinili mo, okay, 10 pinili mo, wala kang napiling defective. Okay? Or pwede rin, sa 10 pinili mo, isa doon, defective. Okay? O kaya, sa 10 pinili mo, dalawa doon, nalaman mo defective, and so on. Okay? Up until, since 10 lang naman yung pipiliin mo, it is possible that yung lahat ng 10 mapipili mo ay defective. Kasi nga, sa isang batch, meron 12 na defective. Okay? So, which means, sa 100 items na to, okay? Sa 100 items na to, of which 12 are defective. Okay? If you ought to choose 10, if your sampling plan involves choosing or randomly selecting 10 items, then the number of defectives na mapipili mo can be as high as 10. Okay? It can be as high as 10. Okay? It can be as low as 0. Ibig sabihin, wala ka talaga mapipiling defective. But it can be as high as 10. Okay? Because historically, we know that in that batch or in the batches of the production, 12 of them are defective. So therefore, kung 10 lang pipiliin mo, posible na lahat nung magpili mo ay lahat ng 10 mapipili mo ay lahat 'yon defective. Okay? So ayun. So there. The random variable takes on the values 0 hanggang 10. Okay. Now, suppose that the sampling plan, okay, the sampling plan now involves sampling items from a process until a defective is observed. Okay. So, iba naman yung sampling plan ngayon. Okay. So, in this case, so we don't have any number. Okay. So, pero say for example, same pa rin. So, sa isang batch, okay, in one batch, there are 100 items produced. Okay. And historically, 12 of those items, okay, are defective. Okay? Now, your sampling plan, okay? Your sampling plan is this. Choose an item until a defective is chosen. Yan. Ito naman yung sampling plan mo. Okay? So, notice the difference between the sampling plan here in the previous example, okay, and in this example. Okay? So, here, we will choose an item until a defective is chosen. Okay? So, ano mangyari? Our x now, okay, or our random variable x, okay, can now take on the number of items chosen before, okay, before a defective is chosen. Ibig sabihin, ilan yung non-defective items na nakuha, okay, bago makakuha ng defective. Okay? Again, the sampling plan implies that we will stop the sampling process, okay, once a defective is chosen. So in this case, ito yung mga scenario, okay? So it is possible na ito yung sample space natin, no? Let's talk this about pag-usapan natin to in the context of the sample space. Okay? So if you actually choose this sampling plan, you would be able to create this sample space. Okay? So ito yung sample space na mabubuo natin. Sa una, defective kagad yung napili niya. Okay? Next, nakapili siya ng isang defective, tapos non-defective yung sumunod. I mean, nakapili siya ng non-defective sa una, tapos defective na yung sumunod. Okay? Then next, you'll have, you pick non-defective, and then defective. Okay, then we stop. Okay? And then, we pick non-defective, and then we pick a defective item. So we stop. Okay. Then, pwede rin makapili mo tayo ng 4 na non-defective. Tapos yung panlima, magiging defective na. Okay. So we stop. So and so on. Okay. Until lahat ng mapili natin na 10. Okay. Or wala naman siya sinabing limit kung ilan yung pipili natin. So we simply choose, okay, an item until, okay, a defective is chosen. So which means yung size ng sample space natin, okay, is infinite. Okay? The size of our sample space is infinite. Okay? So therefore, pero from there, we can actually determine the possible values that your x can assume or that your random variable x can assume. Okay? For example, sa unang sample point natin, okay? We see that we haven't chosen a non-defective item before we have chosen the defective. So wala tayong napiling item before the defective. So 0. So x assumes 0. Okay. While here, okay, your x would assume a value of 1 dahil may napili tayong isang item before choosing the defective item. Okay. And then here, okay, your x would assume 2. Okay. Since there are 2 items chosen, okay, before choosing the defective item. Okay. And so on. So as you can see that that since your S has an infinite sample points, sabihin, itong number of itong mga elements nito ay infinite. We also see that the values that your x can assume here is also infinite. Okay, it can go as low as 0, but it can go as high as infinite. Okay, ibig sabihin nun, puro defective, puro non-defective yung napipili natin. Okay. So, ayun. So that's for example 3.5. Now, another value, okay? Another value that your or another type of value that your random variable can assume is yung tinatawag nating proportion. Okay. Proportion means fraction. Fraction of favorable over the total number of sample points. For example, if there are say 15 boys and 30 girls in a class, so yung 15 over 45 or that's 1 over 3, okay, is the proportion of boys, okay, while 30 over 45 or 2/3 is the proportion of girls. So yung proportion na yan, pwede ring i-assume na value ng ating random variable. Okay? So say interest centers around the proportion of people who respond to a certain mail order solicitation. Okay? Ibig sabihin nun, magpapadala ka ng mail order solicitation. Okay? So, magpapadala ka ng maraming mail order solicitation. Say, sabihin natin na ipapadala mo ay you send N mail order so you send N solicitation. Now, of course, not all of those solicitations would get a response. Hindi lahat ng bindalan mo magre-reply yan. Okay. Say for example, the number of people, okay, who will respond to the solicitation is sabi natin small n. Okay. So n response. Okay. So that x, okay, if x is the proportion, okay, is the random variable that represents the proportion of people who respond, proportion of people responding to solicitation. Okay. Then yung ratio, okay, the ratio n over n, okay, gives the proportion. Okay, gives that proportion. And yung value na yan, okay, yung value na yan would be the or those possible values, okay, would be the one that your random variable x would assume. Okay. Now take note na ang maximum value nito, okay, the maximum value of that is 1. Ibig sabihin lahat ng tao nag-respond sa solicitation mo. Okay? And yung minimum value niyan is 0. Ibig sabihin walang nag-respond dun sa solicitation mo. So therefore, your x may assume a number, okay, or may be assigned a number, okay, that is between 0 and 1. Okay? So, pwede ring proportion yung maging value ng ating random variable. So far, ito na yung mga na-encounter natin. We have mga na-encounter nating possible values that random variables may assume. Okay? Na-encounter na natin yung count. Okay? Na-encounter na natin yung count. So, pag sabi yung count, positive integer. Okay? Na-encounter na natin yung non-numerical or categorical. Okay? These are dummy variables. Ngayon, tatanda lang natin na na kapag ang natin, ang ating random variable is categorical, there are certain operations that we can do. Okay? On categorical variables that we cannot do on other types of variables. Okay? Or there are certain operations on, say for example, count variables that can be done. Okay, that can be done on them. Okay, but cannot be done on categorical variables. Okay, so for example, hindi natin pwedeng i-average, or so, for example, hindi natin pwedeng i-add ang mga categorical values or yung mga value ng dummy variables natin. Kasi pag in-add mo yan, ano namang sense? Okay? It doesn't make sense kung i-add natin sila. Dahil for one thing, they don't really represent numerical quantities. They represent categories. Okay? So we don't really add them, for example, or we don't really average them. Okay? So may mga bagay tayong, or may mga mathematical operations tayo that we cannot do on some types of your variables. Okay? That we can do on others. So ayun, kaya careful tayo sa sa pagtingin kung anong types of variable that kung anong type of variable that we have. So we have count variable, count random variable, we have categorical. Okay? Na-encounter na natin tong proportion. Okay? Okay, we have encountered proportion. Okay? Ang proportion is usually a number between 0 and 1. So we always remember that. Okay. We also have this sige, mamaya na yun, iba. Okay. Ito pala yung 3.7. So let x be a random variable, okay, defined by the waiting time in hours, okay, between successive speeders spotted by radar units. Okay, so ibig sabihin parang ganito. Merong MMDA. Meron siyang parang device. Parang ano tawag nito doon? Speed gun ba 'yon? Okay, parang speed gun which measures the speed of a moving vehicle. So parang hindi binabaril, parang tinututok nila sa isang moving vehicle. Tapos na-measure nun yung speed ng vehicle na 'yon. Okay. So ayun. So that MMDA personnel, okay, of course waits for him to measure or to measure the speed of a vehicle na over sa speed limit. Okay, yun yung speeders na tinatawag. So ang sinasabi niya dito, yung X dito is the waiting time in hours, okay, between successive violators, okay, of speed limit that is spotted by a radar unit. Okay? So in this case, maaring yung waiting time na yan, okay, maaring it can be as short as 0. Baka dalawang magkasunod na speeding kasi nagkakarera sila. So dalawa agad nahuli nung MMDA natin. So it can be as short as 0 Okay? Or it can be as long as, say, for example, X hours. Okay? It can be as long as X hours. Okay? So, now, what we can say here is that your random variable here, okay, would take on values that are what we call that what we consider a continuous variable. Okay, a continuous variable. Paano naging continuous variable? Kumbaga, yung x mo, pwede siyang mag-assume ng zero. Okay, pwede siyang mag-assume ng say 1 hour. Okay? Pwede siya mag-assume ng 0.5 hour. Okay? Pwede siya mag-assume ng 2.25 hours. Okay? Pwede siya mag-assume ng 1.753943 hours. Okay? And so on. So, meaning, for a certain interval, okay, there are infinitely many values that your x can assume. Okay? Sa pagitan, for example, sa pagitan lang ng 0 at saka ng 1 hour. Okay? Yung number of or yung possible values that your x can assume here is infinitely many na. Okay? Kasi pwede siyang 0, pwede siyang 0.01, 0.000001, okay, pwede siyang 0.05, 0.0253, and so on. Okay? So, ito yung tinatawag nating continuous variable. Okay? So, ayun. Isa pa yan sa mga natin. Okay? So, you now have here a continuous value. Okay? So, it means that there are infinitely many values the variable can assume at a finite interval. So kahit na finite yung interval, ibig sabihin kahit na limit yung waiting hours natin. Say for example, ang maximum waiting hours mo ay 2 hours. Okay. Even so, within 0 to 2 hours, yung i-assume na value ng x mo is infinitely many. We consider x now, or we consider now that your random variable is a continuous variable. Okay. Iba yan dito sa count, okay, which is considered to be discrete. Okay. This is considered to be discrete. Okay. So, discrete value. So, paano naman siya naging discrete value? Dahil, ayun lang, yung meron lang certain allowable values like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So, dahil count siya. Okay. Although, meron ding mga random variables that can take on not necessarily positive integers. Okay. Pero discrete yung value na i-assume niya. Say, ang pwede niya lang i-assume na value ay 0, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, and so on. Yun lang. Okay. So, hindi siya count because 1.5 doesn't depict a count. Pero discrete value siya. Okay. So, let's place it as a different category. So, discrete value. Okay. Can take on only possible allowable values. So there are certain values that are allowed. Okay. So ayun. So these are the possible values that your random variable might assume. Okay, so na-explore natin siya from example 3.1 hanggang example 3.7. Okay, so here, let's read on definition 3.2. If a sample space contains a finite number of possibilities, okay, or an unending sequence, okay, with as many elements as there are whole numbers, okay, it is called a discrete sample space. Yun. So, kapag yung sample space niyo, okay, has a finite number of possibilities. Ibig sabihin yung size ng sample space nyo is finite. Okay. O kaya, pwede rin naman siyang infinite. Okay. But the number of elements, okay, the number of elements can be as many as a whole number. So, which means na kung ang number of elements ng ng sample space nyo is infinite, okay, but we can distinctly count each sample space, okay, we call that as a discrete sample space. Okay, so halimbawa in this case, we can say that this is a discrete sample space. Yeah, this is a discrete sample space because there are only 4. Okay, 4 elements of your sample space, so finite. Okay. Also this is a discrete sample space because there are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 elements of your sample space. Okay. Ito is yung isang example niya, yung unending sequence of elements. Okay? But if we can determine na the number of elements here, okay, can be counted as 1, 2, okay, 3, 4, and so on. Okay? Still, this is considered to be a discrete sample space. Okay? So, since we are able to count the number of elements, okay, of the sample space as if we are counting them as whole numbers. Okay, so that's what we consider as discrete sample space. Okay, so we remember that now. So the outcomes of some statistical experiments may be neither finite nor countable. So, maaaring kapag nag-conduct tayo ng statistical experiment, we may not be able to count the outcomes. Okay? The number of possible outcomes. Okay? Pwedeng infinite siya talaga. Or pwede naman siyang finite. Kaya lang, hindi talaga siya mabilang kasi sobrang dami niya. Okay? So, such is the case, for example, when one conducts an investigation, okay, measuring the distances that a certain make of automobile will travel over a prescribed test course on 5 liters of gasoline. Okay? So, for example, yung experiment natin involves trying out a automobile model. Okay? So, meron tayong certain automobile model. And then, lalagyan natin siya ng 5 liters ng gasoline. Okay? And then, i-measure natin yung distance. Okay? I-measure natin yung distance na kayang i-travel nung automobile model na yun. Okay? So in that case, ang outcome kasi natin doon is the distance. Okay? So that might be also our random variable. Okay? So assuming distance, okay, to be a variable measured to any degree of accuracy. Say for example, yung distance natin, i-measure natin until or correct to say centimeter. Ay, hindi. Wag naman. Kilometer. Sige, correct to centimeter. Okay. So, which means, ano yan? Maaring, yung degree of accuracy na sinasabi dito is, say we will measure that distance up to centimeter. Okay. So say, for example, pwede siyang pwede siyang mag-travel ng say 4,112 meters, 4,012.99 meters. So yung 2 decimal places na to, okay, yan yung nagre-represent ng centimeter degree. Okay, yung centimeter na reading. Okay, ibig sabihin, it is possible na makabasa tayo ng distance, okay, na 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, okay, up until say 10, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and so on. Okay. But even if, makabasa ka between 0 from here to 001.00. Okay. Meron ng 100 na values. Okay. Meron ng 100 na values that your X or that your outcome can assume. Okay. Meron ng 100 values. Paano kung hanggang dito pa? Kung simula dito hanggang dito. So, hindi na siya, finite siya. Okay. The distance is finite kasi 10 kilometers lang naman to or 10,000 meters lang naman to. Okay. But the number of possible values that your outcome can assume, okay, or that your random variable can assume is infinitely many. Ito yung sinasabi natin hindi countable. Okay. So, ayan. Finite siya pero hindi countable. Okay. So, clearly, we have an infinite number of possible distances. Okay. In the sample space that cannot be equated to the number of whole numbers. Okay. So, hindi natin siya hindi natin siya mabibilang na as a whole or in parallel to how we count whole numbers. Okay. So, that's one example. So, another example is if one were to record the length of time, okay, for a chemical reaction to take place, okay. So, depende sa accuracy nung pagbasa or pag-record ng time. Say for example, we can record the time correct to say tenths of a millisecond. Okay? So, pwedeng magsimula tayo sa 0.0 millisecond. Okay? Hanggang say for example, 1,000.0 millisecond. Ano yan 0 to 1 second pa lang yan. Okay? But take note na from 0 hanggang 1.0, from 0 millisecond hanggang 1 millisecond, meron ka ng 10 values. Okay? 10 values of time. Okay? That is 0.0 millisecond, 0.01 millisecond, 0.02 millisecond, hanggang 1.0 millisecond, 10 values na yun. Pero ito bilangin nyo, from 0 millisecond up to 1 second. Okay? So, yung 0 millisecond nyo hanggang 1,000 millisecond nyo, okay, that's a finite interval. Okay? But yung number of values na pwede nyo makuha dyan, okay, pwede nyo pwede nyo makuha dyan sa interval na yan, okay, that is accurate to tenths of a millisecond is infinitely many. Okay. So kapag ganito yung case, okay, pagka ganito yung case nung numerical values ninyo, okay, again, this is infinite in number and uncountable. Okay. So these sample spaces are not discrete. Okay. Hindi na discrete yung sample space natin. But rather, okay, it's a continuous sample space now. Okay. So here, by definition, if a sample space contains an infinite number of possibilities equal to the number of points on a line segment. Okay. Remember that a line segment, okay, has two endpoints. Tapos pagdudugtungin natin ng line. Okay. Take note that that this line has a finite length. Okay. This line has a finite length. Okay. Yung length nung line segment nyo, finite yan. Okay. But if you actually count how many line segments are there? Okay. I mean, how many points? Okay. How many distinct points are there between, say, point A and point B? Okay. There are actually infinitely many points. Okay. There are infinitely many points between A and B. So, pansinin niyo na yung scenario na to, kung paano siya naging pareho nito at saka pareho nito. Okay? Again, yung endpoints ninyo maaaring countable. Okay? Maaaring countable sa atin yung endpoints ninyo. Okay? But the values in between, okay, the values in between these points has many values, okay, or can assume many values. Okay, so therefore, in this case, we will assume your sample space to be a continuous sample space now. Okay, so if we obtain our random variable from a random sample space, okay, we consider now your random variable to be a discrete random variable. Okay, and we will know that because the set of possible outcomes for your random variable is countable. Okay, kung mabibilang natin yung number of variables, or I mean the number of values that your variable can assume, okay, then we will consider that random variable to be a discrete random variable. So we say here that the random variables in examples 3.1 up to 3.5, okay, are discrete random variables. So ito yun. Ito, yung number of balls, red balls. Okay, yung number of correct arrangement. Okay. Ito, since your random variable takes on two values, 1 or 0, so discrete yan. Okay. Here, since your random variable takes on values from 0 up to 10, so discrete din siya. Okay, and ito, so discrete din ito, no? Okay. Now, recall dito sa 3.5 that your x, okay, may take on 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 up to infinity actually. Okay, pwedeng yung pwedeng yung x niyo may assume a value of infinity. Okay? It may assume a value of infinity. Okay? But still, we consider this random variable, okay, to be a discrete random variable because even though the number of possibilities or the number of values that it can assume is infinitely many, okay? It is infinitely many. that many is actually equivalent to the number of whole numbers. Okay? Again, kung ang ating sample space, okay? If our sample space or if the number of sample points in our sample space is infinitely many, but equal to the number of whole numbers, we consider this sample space to be a discrete sample space. Okay? And therefore, the random variable that is associated with that sample space to be a discrete random variable. Okay? So, ayun. Remember this definition. Sample space contains finite number of possibilities or an unending sequence with as many elements as there are whole numbers. Ito yun. Unending sequence ito. Okay? Unending sequence ito. But the number is equal to. Okay? The number is equal to the number of whole numbers. Okay? So therefore, we consider the random variable here. Okay? The random variable associated with the sample space to be a discrete random variable. So, ayan. But a random variable whose set of possible values is an entire interval of numbers is not discrete. Okay? So, ito yung sinasabi naman natin tungkol dito. Okay? If the random variable, okay, can assume values that is or that includes an entire interval of numbers, okay, even if that interval is finite, okay, so we cannot consider those random variables to be discrete. Okay, so when a random variable can take on values on a continuous scale, okay, it is called a continuous random variable. Okay, so often the possible values of a continuous random variable are precisely the same values that are contained in the continuous sample space. Okay, so the possible values of a continuous random variable are precisely the same values that are contained in the continuous sample space. So kung ano yung outcomes nung kung ano yung kung ano yung sample points nyo sa sample space, okay? If it is continuous, then the variable or the random variable associated with that continuous sample space also takes those possible values. Okay, so obviously, the random variables described in examples 3.6 and 3.7 are continuous random variables. So ito, 3.6. Okay, so 3.6, even though proportion siya, no? Okay, again, kahit na ang limit ng ay 0 to 1, okay, still, there are infinitely many numbers that are between 0 and 1. Okay, so that is why this proportion, okay, or this the random variable that denotes proportion is a continuous random variable. Okay, while ito obviously, na-point out natin to, that the waiting time in hours, okay, maybe expressed in terms of or maybe expressed in terms of or as accurate, okay, as say for example up to minutes, okay, but still there are infinitely many values that can that your x or that your random variable can assume, okay, between time 0 and say for example time equals 1 hour. Okay, kahit na correct 2 minutes lang yung okay, so there. That random variable is considered to be this one is considered to be a continuous random variable. Okay, so in most practical problems, ito yung tatandaan nyo ngayon. In most practical problems, okay, continuous random variables represent measured data. So if we are dealing with data or quantities that are measured, okay, then most probably this would fall under the category of continuous sample space, and therefore the variable associated with that is a continuous random variable. Okay. While discrete random variables would represent count data. Okay. So pagka nagbibilang lang tayo, okay. So for example, the number of defectives, they represent random, they represent discrete random variables. Okay. But also included in the discrete random variables are yung dummy variable ng categorical data. Okay. And included yung sa continuous random variable yung proportion. Okay. So we remember all those things. Okay. So that ends the discussion on the concept of random variable. Okay. We will discuss discrete probability distributions next.
Okay, so that's lesson 3.1. Okay, so we now proceed with lesson 3.2.
We now proceed our discussion on discrete probability distribution. So recall in the previous lesson that we have classified your random variable as either discrete or continuous. Okay, so in this lesson we will define what is a discrete probability distribution. Okay, so a discrete random variable assumes each of its values with a certain probability. Okay, so when we have a discrete random variable, okay, your random variable assumes a certain value. Ngayon, there is a certain probability, okay, that your random variable would assume such value. Okay? So, yun yung ibig sabihin natin dito. In the case of tossing a coin 3 times, okay? So, in the case of tossing a coin 3 times, so the variable x, okay, representing the number of heads, okay? So, assumes the value 2 with a probability 3x. Okay? Since 3 of the 8 equally likely sample points results in 2 heads and 1 tail. Okay, verify natin yan para mas malinaw sa atin. So, if we are to toss a coin 3 times, okay, ito yung magiging sample space natin. Okay, so the sample space, so tossing a coin 3 times. Okay, so these are this will be your sample space, no? So maaring sa una tail, sa pangalawa tail, and then pangatlo tail. Okay, and then we'll have tail, head, tail, head, tail, head, okay, then head, tail, head, tail, head, tail, and head. Okay, now let us have our x, random variable x, to be the number of heads. in each sample point. Okay? So, which means that our random variable x represents the number of heads that we will obtain when we toss a coin 3 times. Okay? So, in this case, ang possibilities, okay? So, your x can assume a value of 0, okay? Kasi wala talagang head na lumabas. A value of 1, okay? A value of 2, and a value of 3. Okay? So, in this case, yung number of occurrence nun, okay, the number of occurrence nun, n of x equals x, okay? So, it means the number that your x would assume a value x, okay? So, the number of your random variable assuming 0 zero value, ibig sabihin zero head is 1. Yun, is 1. Okay? So the number of your random variable assuming a value of 1 is 1 head. So that's 1, 2, 3, 3. Pag 2 naman, okay? So this is 1, 2, 3. Okay? And then pag 3, so merong 1. Okay? So there. Ngayon, tingnan natin that the total number of outcomes, which means the total number of elements in your or the total number of your sample points is 3, 6, 8. Okay? So ngayon, if we assume that this coin is a fair coin, okay? Then each of these sample points has an equal probability of occurring. Okay? So, equal yung probability of occurring niya kapag ka fair coin yung ginamit natin. Okay? So, we can now write the probability of your x assuming a certain value, okay, of 1/8, okay, para sa for your x to assume a value of 0. 3/8 for your x to assume a value of 1. Okay? 3/8 for your x to assume a value of 2. And 1/8 for your x to assume a value of 3. Okay? So, ito ngayon actually tinatawag nating probability distribution. Okay? Excluding yung column dito sa gitna. Okay? Yan. Yung nakikita nyo ditong table na to. This can now be considered as a probability distribution. Okay? Or discrete probability distribution. Ngayon ito yung sinasabi nung example. The example here states that assumes the value 2 with a probability 3/8. Okay? So, if x would assume a value of 2, ito. If x would assume a value of 2, the probability of that happening is 3/8. Okay? So, since 3 of the 8 equally likely sample points result in 2 heads and 1 tail. So, kung titingnan nyo sa sample points, 1, 2, and 3. So, there are 3 possible outcomes that would result to 2 heads. Okay? When you toss a coin 3 times. So, ito yung sinasabi ng example. Okay. If one assumes equal weights for the simple events in example 3.2. Okay. So, this example 3.2, binalik lang natin. The discussion states that if we assume that Smith, Jones, and Brown has an equal probability of getting their helmet correctly, okay, then we can say that this the sample points in your sample space have equal probabilities as well. Okay, so which means that again, kung equal yung probability ni Smith, ni Jones at saka ni Brown to get their correct helmet, okay, then this sample points would also have equal probabilities. So since there are 6, okay, there are 6 sample points in your sample space, okay, then each of the events, or I mean each of the outcomes, or each of the sample point would have or would happen on a 1/6 probability. So 1/6, 1/6, 1/6, 1/6, 1/6, 1/6. Okay? And so on. Now, if we assume here to have a variable m, okay, to have a variable m which denotes the number of correct matches. Okay. Then, if your m, okay, if your m assumes a value of 0, okay, then meron siyang the probability that your m would assume a value of 0, okay, would be 1/3. 1/6 plus 1/6. So that's 1/3. Okay. While for your m to assume a value of 1, that is 3/6 or 1/2. Okay. And finally, for your m to assume a value of 3, okay, that would be 1/6. Okay. So again, yung nakikita nyo dito is actually the discrete probability distribution for this scenario. Okay? So ito 'yun. Yung nakikita nyo dito. 1/3, 1/2, tsaka 1/6. Okay. Now, note that the values of m exhaust all possible cases. Okay, and hence the probabilities add to 1. Take note na pagka in-add natin yung mga probabilities na nandun sa probability distribution niyo. Say, for example, this is 1/8 plus 3/8 plus 3/8 plus 1/8. So yung summation of the probability that your x assumes a certain value, okay, for I equals 0 to 3, okay, is equal to dapat 1. Pag in-add natin ito. Okay, same thing with this one. Okay. If we add the probability that your m assumes a value m I, okay, for I equals 0 to 3. Again, yung 2 naman kasi would have a probability of 0. So we can simply add, or we can simply ignore that kasi nga 0 naman yung probability that your m would assume a value of 0. So this is simply 1/3 plus 1/2 plus 1/6, or simply 2/6 plus 3/6 plus 1/6, or 6/6 equal to 1. So again, yung sum of probabilities sa probability distribution nyo is equal to 1. Okay? So So frequently, it is convenient to represent all the probabilities of a random variable x by a formula. Okay? So we can express these probabilities, okay, using a formula, if it is possible. Such a formula would necessarily be a function of the numerical values of x that we shall denote by f of x, g of x, r of x, and so on. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, we will create, okay, or we will create an expression, or it is possible that we will be able to create an expression, okay, that results to the probability, okay, results to the probability of your random variable assuming a certain value. Okay? Say for example, if we take a look at this one, okay? We can use f of x, okay? We can use f of x to denote that distribution. Okay? Yung f of x dito would be called a distribution or probability distribution. Okay? But remember that when we write a formula or an expression for f of x, we take note that this f of x should equal the probability, okay, that your random variable x would assume a certain value. Okay, so that is, dapat pag sinubstitute natin yung 0 dun sa function na yun, okay, that should equal to the probability of your x assuming 0 as a value. Or if if we evaluate f of 1, that should result to the probability of your x assuming a value of 1. Okay? So, the set of so itong formula na to is possible if it is possible na natin siya, makapagsulat tayo ng ganitong formula, then mas maganda. Okay? Although sometimes especially sa discrete case or sa discrete sa discrete probability distributions, we usually leave it at to the table. So parang may table nilalagay lang natin siya or dinedenote lang natin yung probability distribution natin or yung discrete probability distribution natin on a table. Okay? So the set of ordered pairs x f of x, okay, is called the probability function, okay, or the probability mass function, PMF. Ito yung mababasa nyo sa mga libro na PMF, okay, or the probability distribution of the discrete random variable x. Okay, so those are the terms, okay, that we use to refer to this ordered pair or the set of this set of ordered pairs. Okay, so the table itself actually denotes that set of ordered pairs. Okay, actually ito na yun, palitan lang natin ng f of x ito. Okay, if we actually replace this with f of x, okay, we replace it with this small x. Yeah, this one is the probability distribution of the random variable x already. Okay, kasi ito na yung set of ordered pairs. Ito na yung ordered pair na 0, 1, 8, 1, 3, 8, 2, 3, 8, 3, 3, 8, 3, 1, 8. Okay, and yun. Ito na yung probability distribution natin. Okay? So we define now, okay, this set of ordered pairs as the probability function, probability mass function, or probability distribution, okay, of the discrete random variable x if for each possible outcome x, okay, the value of your function is positive. Okay? Meaning, it's probability, so that should be positive. Okay? The sum of the values of your function is 1. Okay? Pinakita natin yan kanina. And that the probability or that the function value, okay, is equal to the probability of your random variable x, assuming a value x. Okay? So, yun. So, if we are able to write that f of x, that's okay. Okay? Pero kung hindi naman, again, we can leave it to be at expressed as a table. Okay? So, let's have example 3.8 now. So, a shipment of 20 similar laptops, okay, laptop computers, to a retail outlet, okay, contains 3 that are defective. Okay, so doon sa 20 na laptop that was shipped to a retail outlet, tatlo doon is are defective. Okay, so now the school would now purchase dun sa retail outlet. Okay, and the school would purchase 2. Okay, of those computers. So the question is, find the probability distribution for the number of defectives. Okay, so yun. Here, we will let x to be the random variable, okay, whose values x are the possible number of, or the possible numbers of defective computers purchased by the school. Okay? So since dalawa lang naman yung bibili ni school, okay? It is possible that your x, okay, can your school can buy or would buy 0 defectives. Okay? Maaring 0 dun sa dalawang binili nila, walang defective doon. Okay? While maaari din namang may isang defective dun sa nabili nila. Okay? May isang defective dun sa nabili nila. Or maaaring yung dalawang nabili nila is defective. Okay? Now, our objective is to find the probability distribution of this. Okay? Yung f of x nito. Okay? So, how do we find that? Okay? So, ganito. First thing, okay? First thing, since this is a this is a probability problem. Okay? We attack the problem this way. Okay? So, dito muna, no? Under kasi to ng problem na the probability of say for example, choosing a defective laptop, okay, equals number of i-count natin siya against the number of ways we choose 2 laptops, okay, 2 laptops out of 20. Okay? So, yun yung para denominator natin. The number of ways we choose 2 laptops out of 20. Okay? So, yung numerator dito actually counts the number of ways we choose one kung isang defective laptop yung hahanapin natin, the number of ways we choose one defective laptop out of 3. Remember na meron 3 defective dun sa 20 na yun. So, may 3 defective dun sa 20 na yun. So, kung makakabili tayo ng defective, okay, makakabili tayo ng defective, okay, or kung mamalasin tayo na makakabili tayo ng isang defective, then we have to count the number of ways we choose one defective laptop out of the 3. Okay? And then, kasi may isa pa tayong bibilin Okay? May isa pa tayong bibilin dahil dalawa yung bibilin natin. So ito, we choose one defective laptop out of 3. And number of ways, okay, we choose, okay, one non-defective laptop, okay, out of 17. Kasi kung tatlo dun sa 20 ay defective, then 17 doon ay non-defective. So, for us to find the number of ways that we choose 2 out of 20 laptops, okay? Okay, so for us to find the probability of choosing a defective laptop, okay, we need to find the number of ways we choose one defective laptop out of the 3 na meron doon sa 20, okay, times the number of ways we choose one non-defective laptop out of 17, okay, doon sa 20 na laptops na meron sa retail store, okay, and then we will have to divide that with the number of ways all in all, okay, because that's the ang form kasi nito is more of like n over n, okay, more of like small n over big N. It's the probability, okay. N is the number of ways of the favorable outcome, and n is the total number of ways, okay. So yung numerator natin represents the number of ways that we choose one defective laptop. Kaya lang kasi may dalawang possibility kasi, or meron dalawang distinct na dito, okay. So that is kung makakabili tayo ng or kung mamalasin tayo na meron tayong isang defective na mabibili sa dalawa, okay, sa dalawang bibili natin, yung isa doon defective, then we have to take a look at the possibility na yung first na mabibili natin is defective, okay, tapos ito yung non-defective kasi, okay, in which we will have to choose one out of the 3, okay. So ayun, and then on the second yung para sa second laptop natin, okay, which is non-defective, okay, we will have to choose one non-defective out of the 17, okay, nung natin. So ito yung situation, kaya ito yung parang partial tree diagram nung numerator natin, okay. So in this case, as we can see, since parang successive outcomes, okay, we have to multiply, okay. So sabi ng multiplication rule ng probability, we have to multiply this, okay, yung probability dito at saka yung probability dito, we have to multiply them to get the total probability, okay. And the n, the large N or the big N for this, in this case, is that the number of ways that we will be able to choose 2 laptops out of the 20, okay. So paano natin i-quantify yung number of ways we choose one defective laptop out of the 3, okay. That is simply since number of ways we choose, okay. So pag number of ways we choose, this is simply a combination problem, okay. So which means the number of ways we choose one defective laptop out of 3, that translates to 3C1, okay. That translates to 3C1, okay. Ito naman, itong second number of ways we choose one non-defective laptop out of 17, that translates to 17C1, yan, okay. And then finally number of ways we choose 2 laptops out of 20, okay, that is simply again, number of ways to choose. Okay, so that's combination. This is 20 combination 2. Okay, so that gives you the probability of choosing a defective laptop. Okay, so ngayon, since ang problem natin is actually evolves, okay, from having 0 defective to 1 defective at saka 2 defective. Okay, we can actually write your we can kung mapapansin nyo, yung X ngayon dito, yung number of defective is actually nakadepende dito. Okay, nakadepende dito. But you also have to remember that this number, okay, itong number na to, okay, is also dependent. Nakadepende rin itong number na to doon. Okay, pansinin nyo. Say for example, let's have the problem as this. The probability of choosing all non-defective laptops. Okay? So, again, ang denominator natin dito, okay, is still the number of ways we choose 2 laptops out of 20. Okay? Then, since non-defective yung bibili nating laptops, okay, or yung mabibili nating laptops, okay, we will be able to determine the number of ways we choose or we choose 0 defective laptop out of 3. Okay? And the number multiplied to the number of ways we choose 2 non-defective laptops, okay, out of 17. Yan.
Good afternoon. Good morning pala. Okay. Actually, what happened there was accidentally na naputol ko yung yung recording. So yung kasunod na discussion nun is on the next recorded presentation na. Okay? And since there are only 4 minutes left on our time, so hindi ko na we will not play the next presentation. Okay? But rather we will continue on this sa next next meeting natin. Okay? Although ipo-post ko, I will post this recorded presentations as well as yung recording nung meeting natin. Recording ng meeting natin sa playlist ninyo. Okay, sa YouTube playlist ninyo. So you can actually finish up the discussion there. Okay. So ayun. And then we will continue on adding up dun sa recorded presentations na to. Okay, so ganun yung magiging plano natin para makaka-catch up tayo dun sa mga topics natin that we need to discuss until matapos natin yung term natin. Okay? So I think that's it for today. Siguro pwede ko na kayong i-dismiss. Okay, so reminders lang yung mga announcements natin. Paki-ano lang.